Missouri. It's kind of a classic Missouri edge take, a guy where you go, who is that? And then he ends up being a really, really good player. They've had tons of them over the years across multiple coaches. I don't know what they have. That's just how they've been able to do things. Carolina gets him in last cycle on kind of a quiet visit. He ends up still sticking with Missouri, but obviously this is a guy that the staff is familiar with. Sterling Lucas, outside linebackers, edge coach, is familiar with. And I was going back, Wes, and looking at some things, whether it was his film or just what was being said about him. Our guy, Charles Power from On 3, really liked him. You know, Jalen played in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game, which is like their version of the Shrine Bowl out there. Said he looked like the most physically gifted defensive lineman on either team, and that was a game that produces annually lots of talent on the lines of scrimmage. You know, 6'6", 240, really long arms. So when you start looking at the physical tools, the physical gifts, he's got them. And Sterling Lucas, you know, I'd hitch my wagon to his track record of development any day. And this is a really, really good get for them. They'll bring Stewart back. They'll have some other guys in the hopper. But this is someone who could probably play a role for you next year.
Yeah, I do look at offers and evaluation and sort of put a little bit of stock into certain guys. So I would say if Sterling Lucas is co-signing for you, Charles Power is co-signing for you, and Missouri just as a program is co-signing for you on the defensive line, then there's probably a pretty good track record when you add those sources up. So, you know, I would put it like this too. What are expectations for him in year one? That's completely that's completely going to be determined by what happens in the next 8 months. You know, like would it be a shock if this was like kind of more of a slow burn and he came on a little bit later? No. Would it be a shock though if he came in, hits the ground running, and just pushes and starts opposite of Dylan Stewart? I don't think that's a shock either. You know, I think some guys, we've talked about it. Some guys, it's a little bit more of a specific, you know, we'll get to Nick Sharp here in a second. Like, you're talking about a guy much later in his career. There's a specific goal for his role that was probably discussed when he was on campus. Go back to, like, the way we talked about, let's say, a Vandrevius Jacobs at wide receiver. It was more like, all right, here's a guy who redshirted for Florida State, comes in, and you were saying, if he plays in year one at Carolina, that'd be cool. If he doesn't, that doesn't mean that he's not going to ultimately make an impact. So I think high upside, we'll sort of see how quickly he can develop, going back to Jaylen Brown, once he gets on campus, once we get another look at him kind of in person and stuff like that. But regardless, that's a position, man, you want to just stack talent. And I think let's go back to Charles Power a little bit. He really likes the athletic upside of this entire South Carolina class when you start looking at the front seven. The fascinating thing about it this year is that when you're, and I'm kind of throwing the high school guys in here is what I'm referring to, it's not a class filled with just 4-star, 5-star guys. And, you know, Charles does the On 3. He's a national On 3 rankings guy for those who don't really follow that stuff closely. Charles sort of stepped out on a limb with Dodd very early on and said, hey, this guy's a 4-star. And, you know, when Charles says that, I pay attention as well. He was ahead of the curve on Lenora Sellers. He was ahead of the curve on Nikki Memori, just to name a few. Ahead of the curve, we'll see what Jaquel Hallman ends up doing in college, but from a high school standpoint, he was ahead of the curve there too. So I think that's that position group, if you kind of throw all those guys together, it's not one that's going to be mentioned like nationally as, oh, Carolina had this amazing class in the front seven. But there's a bunch of high upside guys when you start to just add up that entire group.
Yeah, I mean, Jaquavius Dodd, back-to-back years with double-digit sacks in high school. So, you know, I was talking earlier about how he was kind of raw, but, like, there is production there. You know, you can see this is a kid who's 6'5", who's a basketball kid who still has room to grow. He can run. He's got a lot of potential. You know, talked to his high school coach. think that was earlier this year, and he said, I mean, I'm not really going to be surprised, like, whatever happens from a development standpoint. Like, he could be an NFL guy. So they have, you mentioned some of the guys earlier that Charles is like, that South Carolina recruited that maybe didn't have, maybe they're not 5 stars, maybe they didn't have 50 offers, but, a Vakari Swain, Jalen Kilgore, those are a couple other ones. There are some that On3 has as an industry outlier, they would call it, where they got him ranked, a little higher, or in some cases a lot higher, than some of the other services. So, yeah, I mean, will be interesting. I think with Jaylen Brown, that's a kid that we started diving into to go back to him. We started diving into him a little bit last year when we found out South Carolina was making a run, and man, just physically so many tools. And you look at some of the guys that Sterling Lucas has made a run at in recruiting. He's not afraid to get in those big battles. He's not afraid to stand on the table for a guy that he feels like is really good, even if they don't have that huge offer list. And Dodd was one of those. Didn't have the huge offer list, wasn't a 4-star by anyone except for On3, when he committed, when South Carolina ended up offering him. So he's done a really good job with that room, and I think Brown is a heck of a get to add to that room for next year.
What do you think happens next at that position at edge? That was one of those we kind of had listed as 1 to 2 as our latest sort of projections in terms of number of guys out of the portal. So there's one, obviously. Do you, it might be too early to say, if you're Carolina, do you stand pat there, or are you still very active in searching for another guy?
Well, the priority is the interior, but I think you don't close yourself off to any other potential additions there. You also, I think, keep in mind, you're recruiting Kelby Collins from Florida. Versatile guy. Was an edge out of high school, but the thought was, hey, this guy could play tackle. He did play tackle at Florida. And we'll kind of see. I've heard, South Carolina thinks he might be able to play some of both, depending on personnel packages. He's supposed to visit this week, so we'll probably hear a little bit more. But all that to say, if it's a guy like Kelby Collins where you feel like, hey, here's somebody we can play inside or outside, that might change it. Maybe he becomes kind of a pseudo second guy, of course, if you can land him, because he's got Alabama and some other schools after him also.
Well, we have seen Carolina kind of use those, I would say, athletic interior guys. Like you look at Atonka Hemingway, at TJ Sanders. We've seen them use them kind of in multiple roles up front. So I think this year, as much as we talked about 3-3-5 all offseason, Carolina leaned back into the 4-2-5, and it was very clear why. You had the defensive player of the year on one side at defensive end / edge, and then you had arguably the best freshman pass rusher in the country on the other side. So, of course, you were going to lean into that 4-man front with those 2 edge guys. Depending on what that looks like going into next year, if you have a Kelby Collins who's kind of like he maybe could be a 3-man front end and a 4-man front interior guy, maybe you get a little bit more multiple again. Just depending on what that group ends up looking like. We're getting kind of ahead of ourselves there, but you want to have options, I think. So we'll see where that goes. All right, y'all. When we come back, we will talk more about Nick Sharp, South Carolina's other addition out of the transfer portal this weekend. He's Chris. I'm Wes. This is The Game, and this is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. right, guys, you know what? It is gift buying time. If you're looking for that special gift for someone in your life or looking for a gift for a graduate in your life, look no further than our friends over at Gold Line Framing in West Columbia. Kendall Walsh, Joni James, they're going to take great care of you and any and all of your custom framing needs. Again, that could be for diplomas for those graduates. That could be for original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags, signed prints, memorabilia. Pretty much anything you could think of, they can take it and make it special, extra special, with a framing job for you. Gold Line Framing has been in business for over 20 years, so head on over to 511 12th Street, West Columbia, where you can check out their art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items, all right there in store. If you already know what you want or you want to set something up or you got questions, just go ahead and give them a call, 803-739-1337. Again, that's 803-739-1337. Hit up our friends today at Gold Line Framing. All right, welcome back in. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Talking portal. Chris, the second commitment of the weekend, Nick Sharp, Wake Forest interior offensive lineman. Gamecocks so far, man, are running their playbook here. And, I think early on, there were some names that were out there. Then there were some names that, of course, have maybe flown a little bit more under the radar that haven't maybe leaked out there yet. But for the most part, one thing I think we've all had a pretty good grasp on and reported on is, hey, here are the priority positions. Here's what it's going to look like kind of from a numbers standpoint. And one position that is probably a little bit under the radar in terms of being a priority when compared to, obviously, linebacker, interior defensive line. But a spot that I just get the impression, man, that they really wanted to sort of knock out some needs on is the offensive line. And so we've seen them kind of lean into this idea of they want to build this O-line with their high school recruiting. But on a year-to-year basis, you want to make sure that you can create that competitive depth at that position. And so for them, they probably actually have one of the better tackle situations that Carolina has had in a long time, I think. But when you look at what Kamar Bell did, Torricelli Simpkins did, coming in and both earning starting spots, and then, of course, Mr. Veteran, Rashawn Lee, Tyler's favorite player.
Yeah.
He, all three of those guys leaving. And, Chris, I don't think when we say that, I don't think that means, hey, a Trevon Ball can't be a starter next year. A Tree Babalade, if he were to slide inside, a Marquis Anderson. We talked about Ryan Brubaker seemed to have gained more trust from the staff as his career is going on to this point. That doesn't mean those guys can't win jobs.
Right.
But I look at what they're doing right now, and I look at bringing in Nick Sharp as the exact same as what they did with Kamar Bell and Torricelli Simpkins. Bring these guys in, and then, may the best man win. And then whoever doesn't win becomes that depth that you're looking for. So it's easy to sort of take the guys you followed in high school recruiting and start to pencil them in. Hey, this guy could be that starter. This guy could be this one. But it seems to me like one of the biggest priorities just generally for this program is to do everything in their power to avoid what happened in 2022 when you had so many injuries that it just completely decimated your offense because of what happened on the O-line.
Yeah, I mean, last year you look at it and you knew you were going to have to make a move at center, right? That was kind of where you started. Like, what's going to happen with center? And then there were some other questions you needed to answer too, really. I mean, on the interior, you had some guys that had played. You had some guys you could plug in, but they wanted to start at center. And so remember we heard that portal season, hey, Vershawn might play center or you might find a guy from the portal. And the two guys they ended up getting that factored in heavily on the interior were Kamar Bell and Torricelli Simpkins III. And I remember hearing, hey, Kamar could play some center. Remember, he was a later get, like very quiet. Kind of not snuck him in, right? But, I mean, just kind of quiet at the end there. Torricelli, was someone that they pinpointed, as the staff did. Hey, he could maybe factor in at center, and then if he won the center job, then this and this would happen, right? It was kind of, what are you going to do with Rashawn? You have a similar situation this year where you're losing your starting center, and then you're trying to add some depth at guard. And while you're adding that depth at guard, the competitive depth, one of those guys could also factor in at center. So Kamar, I'm sitting here reading Kamar Bell's bio. He had played a ton. He had started 29 games in college. Torricelli had started, I don't have his figure in front of me, he had started a bunch of games in college. And it's talking about here on his Gamecocks Online bio for Kamar, hey, he could factor in at center. What ended up happening, we didn't know the answer to any of those things. We didn't know if Torricelli would play center, if he would start at center. Same thing for Kamar. We didn't know if they would even win a guard spot, but they ended up doing that. And they ended up moving Vershawn to center. I feel like it's similar this year. Going into next season, into 2025, you could have someone from the current roster slide over and win that spot. Or the emphasis, Wes, seems to be on guys that have either played guard and center or interior type guys that you feel like you could slide over to guard. We've heard that kind of combo a lot, like a guy who can play guard or center. That's what they found last cycle. They seem to be looking for it again this year.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked, like when Sharp committed, hey, can he play center? Is this guy going to play center? looking back, mostly right guard for him specifically at Wake Forest. Could he end up playing center? Like, yeah, absolutely. I think in the perfect world, though, you're bringing in Sharp to compete at guard, and then you look at some of these other guys, some names that have popped up that have played a little more kind of true center. In a perfect world, I think you're looking at adding at least one guy who has that center experience, and then maybe even a third, just kind of versatile guy. Cross training. Can you play? Some guys just have that knack. They could potentially play center guard or even tackle in a pinch, and I think that would be a just nice added value for these guys. Also, with Sharp, something, Chris, I've noticed, I had to make that, like you're always learning, I had to make that mental note. Triple check how much time left these guys have. Because we were talking about, not controversy, but like all the different, 4, 5, 6 games for Jaylen Brown. Nick Sharp, if you go through his Wake Forest bio, it appears he's a 1-year guy based on what he's listed as. Now, if you look at his tweet, he says, if you go back to when he entered the portal or X post, whatever, he says 2 years of eligibility left. And so, for what I've been told, he does indeed have 2 years left if he wants them. Now, you kind of say that almost in parentheses, like he's an older guy now. If he has the season he wants, if he comes in, if he plays well, if he starts, I'm under the impression like this is him wanting to prove he can do it at the SEC level. And then, this could be his last year anyway because he is an older guy at this point. But it is good to know. It is newsworthy, it is noteworthy to know if he needed another year, if he decided he wanted another year, because you never know how many times, Spencer comes in, we're all saying, oh, he'll be at South Carolina for 1 year.
Right.
Things happen. Next thing you know, I want to give it another shot. So at least good to know there. He is an older guy. It's now time for him. But if he wanted the extra year, it is there.
And it does seem like, whereas with Jaylen Brown at edge, they took a young, talented player who could still factor in. It seems like a common thread, at least with most of the guys they're recruiting on the offensive line, do have a lot of experience. It may not be a 29-game starter like Kamar Bell across 2 different schools, mostly FAU. May not be a 29-game starter, but they're generally going to be guys who are in their 3rd, 4th, 5th year who have played some ball because, to your point earlier, you can bring those guys in and feel like they can plug in and give you, at the minimum, some depth.
I think the younger guys on the offensive line, I think they feel good about who they've brought in from the high school class. So, it's almost like, if you found a no-brainer type, would you still potentially bring him in? Yes, but it feels like for kind of those cycles that are starting to become like your redshirt freshmen or your true sophomores or your redshirt sophomores, you're sticking with the guys you've recruited out of high school, but then you're just supplementing the room by adding some veteran depth, some older guys, and we'll see what else they can do with that position moving forward because some guys coming onto campus this week. So we have a very, very busy week in the transfer portal for South Carolina in terms of visitors who will be in Columbia. So we'll hit on that on the other side. He is Chris. I am Wes. This is The Game, and this is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour.
If you are hungry like me, check out our friends over at Firehouse Subs. That's firehousesubs.com, or download the Firehouse Subs app. That is my preferred method and the easiest way to use the Rapid Rescue to go. You can avoid the wait and order online. There are 15, and growing, by the way, locations of Firehouse Subs all around the Midlands. So no matter where you're at in the Midlands, our guys at Firehouse Subs can help you out with lunch, dinner, or catering. If you haven't had the new French dip sandwich, go check it out now. Premium cut roast beef, caramelized onions, cheese, with the au jus dipping sauce. Of course, that's all on one of their classic toasted Firehouse Subs rolls. Hot Sauce Bar is also back. Add some flavor to any sub when you dine in or pick up. Firehousesubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app, 15 convenient locations all around the Midlands. Use the Rapid Rescue to go.
All right, rolling right along. Wes here, Chris here. This is the Game Transfer Portal show today. Chris, lots of names out there, man. People that were kind of getting a little antsy about the portal got their wishes, couple of commits.
Not enough.
Some guys to watch, man. I think you start to look that list of visitors for this week getting ever longer. And a good mix, some kind of under the radar guys, but then you start seeing some big names on there as well. And I would say for Gamecock fans, maybe none bigger than Justice Haynes, Alabama running back, supposed to visit South Carolina this week, supposed to visit starting today actually. And does this one fit into a Rocket Sanders, Spencer Rattler level potential for you just when you start talking about, he's not quite had the production that Rocket had when you kind of look at 2 seasons ago, going on 3 seasons ago at Arkansas. But just in terms of a national name, a name that will get people fired up sort of a name that makes people take notice. Certainly a reason for Gamecock fans to be excited about this possibility.
Yeah, I'd put it in that category because of what you said, like the talent level, the potential. Different than a Rattler or a Rocket Sanders. I mean, Justice Haynes has not, rushed for 1,400 yards in an SEC season. But, I mean, you look at this guy, Wes, on 3 industry ranking, the weighted average of all the major recruiting services, this guy was a top 35 prospect. I mean, he was just missed I think he literally missed the 5-star cut by 1 spot because he was number 33 nationally. So he just missed it. His dad, Veron Haynes, former Georgia and NFL great, big-time recruit out of high school. And, you look at what he's done at Bama, and it's not anything where you go, oh, he hasn't done anything, right? I mean, he played some his freshman year, and in this past season, he did rush for 448 yards, 5.7 a carry, 79 carries, right? So I think for him, probably looking to go somewhere where he can have an opportunity to be the guy. I don't know all the ins and outs of why he's leaving Bama, but you could kind of presume that. And for South Carolina, they've got some guys on their roster that are going to be battling for the starting job and battling for playing time, but they are losing Rocket Sanders, who carried the load for them. And so this makes a ton of sense. As soon as he hit the portal, we heard, hey, this is probably going to be a guy to watch, and South Carolina's in on him. Ole Miss is in on him. They recruit every high-profile portal running back that enters the portal.
But you can just scratch out running back.
Just any position? Pretty much.
If it's a portal guy, they are involved.
Yeah, that is true.
Good grief.
Michigan, Ohio State also involved with Justice Haynes, so he's got some suitors, but this one's going to be very interesting because if you're someone who, whether you're in the camp of, hey, we need a Rocket Sanders replacement, or if you're in the camp of, there's a lot of people that they want big name, big time talents. They don't get as excited about some of the other guys, even though those are important. This one should be one you pay close attention to.
Yeah, and I think, you do wonder what Haynes could do as the top back on a team. And like you said, he split time. You also had a quarterback who was taking away quite a bit of those carries as well. And yeah, in South Carolina, obviously Lenoris is going to run the ball quite a bit too. But it is one of those things, I feel like, man, if you're a South Carolina fan, you're probably at the point where it's hard not to start to get a little bit excited thinking about the idea of already having a Lenoris Sellers and his tackle-breaking ability in your backfield and add Haynes along with what else you have at that running back position. Like, that's the position where I look at and say, you really just want that one guy. Like, it's a position where there is some talent, there's some depth, but you've lost a little bit of those numbers, or you will, once this season completely expires, and you can be selective. And that was a position where we were saying, hey, they're being patient at this spot. They didn't necessarily run out there and go after the first couple of running backs that were in the portal. However, you see when Haynes hopped in the portal, they instantly did jump on board here. And, when you get a guy like this on your campus, I've said this in general, but I think it certainly applies to this. Haynes is a guy a lot of teams are going to be interested in. So to go ahead and have him, reportedly about to visit, that speaks volumes about the mutual interest on this thing on both sides of it, I think.
Yeah, very quickly, South Carolina got involved very quickly, pretty quickly. The visit got scheduled. So that's what, when names come out in the portal, it's very common, much more common than high school recruiting, right? Like high school recruiting, there could be a guy from Georgia who's a 5-star, like the state of Georgia. And, yeah, people ask, like, hey, if they have an offer, are they going to offer this kid, right? But in college is different because a lot of these guys are known commodities. Like, a lot of people who pay attention to college football or recruiting, they know who Justice Haynes is, right? He's not a household name to the extent of, Travis Hunter or Ashton Jeanty, but he plays for Bama. He's played for them a lot. He's a former highly rated recruit, so people know who he is. So knowing that, hey, Carolina needs a running back out of the portal, knowing that he jumps in, people naturally, hey, is this going to be a guy, right? And turns out he is. That's not always the case, but he certainly was a guy for them this year. So like we said, I mean, the competition is going to be there. Michigan, school to watch. Ole Miss is school to watch. Ole Miss is balancing. They seem to be juggling recruiting, 3 or 4 portal backs. I don't really know Michigan, how many they're juggling. Carolina, not to say they don't have others on the board, but they seem to be pretty dialed in on Haynes right now.
A little more laser focused, it seems like.
Does that help or not help? I don't really know, but it is something.
Yeah, it's noteworthy. It's definitely noteworthy. And currently right now, so transfer portal rankings, this stuff is fascinating, y'all. If you just Google On3 transfer portal rankings, and you can, just like the high school ones, you can kind of compare the different ones, industry comparison. You see an On3 ranking, see an On3 industry ranking, which is kind of like the weighted average. And there are some, even more so than high school, there are some very different takes on what the different portal guys should be ranked if you look across the different sites. But if you look at Justice right now, On3 industry ranking, number 19 overall prospect in the portal. So that gives you an idea of kind of where he falls nationally. And then the number 1 running back in the portal. So a little bit of difference between the two. Let's see, if you dial it into just specifically, so that was in kind of the average, the industry ranking. Specifically, 24/7 Sports has him number 1. On3 has him number 2 at running back in the portal, behind only, who would it be? Ahmad Hardy? That's the kid out of Mississippi.
Yeah, ULM, and that's one of the backs that Ole Miss is after as well.
I have no idea where that kid's going, but completely surface level, as soon as he went in the portal, I was like, that guy's going to go to Ole Miss. Didn't it just feel that way?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, it did. It did.
Because he's from Mississippi.
Yep.
So I think it's hard to, and I don't know what Ole Miss's needs are there. I know they needed a.
Last year they took 17 running backs.
And still had trouble, I feel like, at that position.
Yeah, they're losing some guys. I think Logan Diggs is going to be back, but he's had a couple knee injuries now. They definitely want at least one guy out of the portal, and they're balancing a few. So whether or not that weighs in, I don't really know. I don't know what Justice Haynes – I think we'll need to see. He's going to take some visits, and we'll probably hear more after then.
Yeah, but important thing for Carolina is you've got a visit on the books, and that's much more noteworthy than even just having a visit on the books with a high school guy. Like you yes, the competition is tough, but you kind of start to narrow the competition down pretty quickly when you get those visits set up. So we'll see where that goes. We'll keep y'all updated. But we got to hit one more little timeout here. When we come back, we're going to talk Heisman Trophy and whether the voters got it right. He's Chris. I'm Wes. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back in. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. The game, Chris, Heisman Trophy was handed out this weekend. You're a voter now, man. Breaking news.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We're going to tell Chris if he got it right or wrong. What was your vote, man? And so you just have to pick first, second, or third? Or like first, second, and third, I should say?
Yep. You can only pick 3. You just do it online. You might can mail it in if you want. I don't know. I did it online. They give you a deadline. Like, they open it, and then they give you a deadline. Then you are not allowed to tell anybody until after the ceremony how you voted.
Some people break that rule, I feel like.
I did tell my wife, and that was it, I think. Nobody really asked either because I haven't really advertised it. But, yeah, you can pick 3, and then you order them, and that's it. Put in the player's name, put in the school. That was it. I did vote for Travis Hunter, number 1. It's kind of been I feel like it was a little bit weird. I shouldn't be surprised in the social media era, but, in the aftermath and leading up to it, it's like if you didn't vote for Travis Hunter or just anybody else, right? But those are kind of the main 2. Like, people were going back and forth the most, it seemed like, on Travis Hunter or Ashton Jeanty, the outstanding running back from Boise State. And it seemed like people were putting down the other, if they didn't vote for him. Kind of silly, right? It's like, no, they're both good, like objectively great players.
Yeah.
So, but I had Hunter. I did have Jeanty second. The third spot was really hard, and I just kind of on a whim went with Cam Ward because I do think he's outstanding. After, I was like, should I have gone with somebody else there? Cam Scatterbo from Arizona State was one. I mean, Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, could have been in there. There's another quarterback or 2. But, I think the most important was just number 1,
Yeah. Is Cam Ward playing in their bowl game?
I don't know.
I feel like I saw something about that, but don't remember what it said. Too much going on. By the way, I think Travis Hunter is your Heisman winner. Like, I think that's the right pick. I do. And I think any other year, Jeanty probably has a great case to be the guy. But for Travis Hunter, and I see one of the silliest things about this entire argument is people are like, oh, you're giving it to him just because he plays a lot of snaps.
Yeah. They made up the snap count as an official.
Like, what's the word for that? Like, you're making, if you make that as your argument, you're not arguing in good faith. Like
that straw man argument.
Yeah, it's like it's not. Nobody is saying Travis Hunter. Nobody that's actually voting for him is voting for him just because he played a lot of snaps. They're voting for him because he played a lot of snaps and played well on both sides of the ball.
More than well.
Yeah, like
not like replacement level average.
Well, I saw one thing floating around, got God knows how many views, and it was like a screenshot, and it was Jeanty, he's rushed for this many yards, first in the country, this many carries, first in the country, yards per carry, third in the country, and then it's like Travis Hunter, and it was his receptions, receiving yards, and it was like 5th in the country, and I'm like, okay. He also played lockdown corner. That's not in your screenshot. Like, you're not just the fact that he is that high in the stats just at receiver and then still plays lockdown cornerback. You're making my point for me, I think. So, I don't know. They both were deserving. Like, you had to give it to one of them. You can't. There are no ties in the Heisman, so I think the voters got it right because to me that's an award for if there is a generational guy a given year, and he is. That's who it has to go to. And if there's not, then give me the guy that just produced unworld, crazy stats.
Yeah, if Jeanty would have won it, you would have gone, that makes sense, I mean.
Yeah.
He had
any other year, I think he wins it. But
Oh, yeah.
this time, it was just Travis Hunter's year.
It was. I mean, that's who I voted for. And again, I had Ginty second, and he could have. I think that's how most people voted. Like, I've seen some people put out, here's how I voted. Well, of course, that's how most people voted because that's how it ended up being. But most of the people that I know that I've seen, that I kind of pay attention to, that's what their vote looked like. Exciting thing, Wes, is Norris Sellers is going to be on some preseason lists. He already is on some preseason lists for this thing next year.
Way too early lists, they call it.
Yes.
But
everything's way too early nowadays, though.
Man, you got it's hard to come out of nowhere to win the thing. So, as much as you hate that it matters, it does matter that he's already going to be in that thought process going into next year. You know,
you can't have extremely long odds and then all of a sudden you're number one.
Yeah, like you have to
seems
have
unlikely.
A insane year. I guess like what Cam Newton probably came out of nowhere and won it. Anyway, yeah, I think they got it right. Sellers certainly will be the most likely Heisman winner South Carolina has had in a long time, just in terms of odds going into next year. So, all right, y'all, we're out of time. He is Chris. I am Wes. Appreciate y'all for joining us. We're going to turn it over here momentarily to Terry, and then Chris and I will be back and see you tomorrow. Y'all have a good one.
What'd they say about that thing? What'd they say about it?
All right, guys, before I get out of here, let me tell you about our friends over at Pro Swing. Our guys at Integrated Media have opened their second Pro Swing location. And if you are near to us here in downtown Columbia, great news. It is near to you. 4708 Forest Drive.